All right. We've introduced midpoint before. All right, let's go ahead and write down our official definition. So a midpoint, the point that divides a segment into two, what kind of segments? Congruent. Cool. Congruent, that's our fancy geometry word for equal. All right, so remember our symbol, or the way that we mark that in a diagram, is by using our congruency marks. Now, in this diagram, which one of those is the midpoint?
The middle one.
Okay.
Right.
All right, so we have the midpoint here. What do we call the other two? End points. So we have one end point, and then the other end point. It is one word. Okay, with the midpoint in the middle. Now, what I want you guys to add to this picture, we're going to call this point x1, y1, and then we're going to call this point x2, y2. Yes, it is a comma. All right, so A and B, or whatever letters I want to call them, you're going to have 2 points labeled x1, y1, and one labeled x2, y2. If you're trying to find the midpoint, we're going to use this formula right here. Oh, well. This point, sorry, that formula right there. The M stands for midpoint, so you're going to have your x, m, and ym. Those are your midpoint values for your x and y. What you're going to do essentially is take the two x's from your points, x1 and x2, so the x's from the endpoints, you're going to add them and divide by 2. Then you're going to take the y's, add them and divide by 2, and that will give you your midpoint. It's pretty straightforward. Okay? So let's take a look at an example. These are my endpoints. The 2 points that they give you, if they're asking for the midpoint, they have to give you both of the endpoints. So let's go ahead and plug that into our formula. Well, here, first I want you guys to label x1, y1, x2, y2. Label your point so we know what we're talking about when we plug the numbers in. So I'm going to take x1 and x2 and add them together. So what would that look like? It would be 10, right? So 3 plus 7 is 10, and we're going to divide that by 2 in a second. And then what if I do y1 plus y2? You get 6. Does everybody see how I got this? Yes? Add the x's divided by 2, add the y's divided by 2. Now we're going to simplify. What's 10 divided by 2? What's 6 divided by 2? All right, so the midpoint is, well, 5, 3. Tried to circle, it didn't work. So that's going to be your midpoint for that example. Sorry, everything moved over. All right, what about this next one? We're going to label it again. x1, y1, x2, y2. What would my formula look like? Take a negative 4, add that to 6. What does that give you? 2. All right, then I'm going to have to divide that by 2 in a second. Well, all right, and then I covered up the y's, but what are they? Is it 0 and negative 4? What's 0 plus negative 4? Still negative 4, didn't change, and we're going to divide that by 2 as well. All right, so what's 2 divided by 2? 1. And what's negative 4 divided by 2? Negative 2. All right, you guys catch on to what's happening here? All right, go ahead and do the next 4 examples, and then we'll see if you got the right answer. Trying to get this in. Do all the examples, please. There shouldn't be so much talking. Yes, it is. It is. Guys, finally,
You got it.
this just becomes all right, who has the answer for number 3? Number 3. Yes, you.
-5, -5.
Good. -5, -5. You should have gotten. What about number 4? Daniel. Yes. I would prefer you write decimals there instead of fractions because visually seeing decimals is easier to graph than visually seeing fractions. So go ahead and write those as decimals. What about example number 5? Yes.
-3, -1.5.
Good. -3, -1.5. And example 6. Yes. 3, +3 and -3.5. All right, did everybody get those? Pretty straightforward use of the formula. You do need to have that memorized, so make sure you're on top of that. All right. Now, in those questions up there, what did I give you and what was I asking for?
The end.
I gave you the endpoints, and I'm trying to find the midpoint. This question, this type of question here on the bottom of the page is different, okay? Instead of giving you both endpoints and asking for the midpoint, I'm going to give you one endpoint, the midpoint, and I want to know what the other endpoint was. So basically it looks like this. Like that. I give you one endpoint, the midpoint, and then I want to know what the other endpoint would be. That's what these questions are. Now when you get this kind of question, we're going to use something called the DMSE process, or DMSE, right, method. DMSE stands for double the midpoint, subtract the endpoint.
Double the midpoint, subtract the end.
So it's a little abbreviation, okay? So you have to make sure you do it in the correct order. You don't want to subtract the endpoint and then double the midpoint. That wouldn't make sense. You have to double the midpoint first, and then whatever that is, you're going to subtract the endpoint away, and that will give you your final answer. So for example, the midpoint of a segment is 3, -4. I like to do this, so I isolate what number I'm supposed to be doubling, okay? And I'm going to subtract the other one away because that's the endpoint. So if I double the midpoint, what would I get? 6, -8. And yes, you do still write it as a point, by the way. And then you're going to subtract the other endpoint away like this. Okay? You have to set it up this way. You need to write it vertically. You need to include the parentheses because there are still points. You need to have the subtraction sign out here. This is very important. I have 6 minus -2. What does that turn into?
8.
It turns into 8. It's a double negative. That's why it's important you write it very carefully. 6 minus the negative is really 6 plus 2. Then I have -8 minus 2. -10. So the other endpoint would be 8, -10. How could you check to make sure that that is correct? You can take this endpoint and this endpoint, plug them into the midpoint formula, and see if you get that. There's always a way you can double check your work. So this is the DMSE formula. Now, this is not hard, right? It's multiplying times 2 and then subtracting. What's difficult about this type of question, everybody listen, people are talking over me, I don't appreciate that, okay? The difficulty with this kind of question is confusing it with the one above. Okay? You don't just automatically use the midpoint formula if you see 2 points. Okay? You only use the midpoint when it's 2 endpoints. If they give you 1 endpoint, 1 midpoint, or there really only is one, then you use the DMSE. Okay? All right. I want you guys to try those 3 examples, please. Make sure you're clear on which one's the midpoint, which one's the end point. I expect to see all of the work shown in the way that I've modeled it in the notes. Just make sure you're practicing that way. Alright, so anybody have an answer for example 1? Example 1. I mean, I don't have an answer. I can only tell if it's right or wrong if you let me know what you got. Yes, 4, comma 2. That's correct. Hopefully I really got that. What about example 2?
Negative 7, comma 4.
Very good. That's correct. And then example 3, clean.
-4 and -2.
Yep. Did everybody get those? Yeah, pretty straightforward. Just make sure you know what type of question it's asking when you see this. Alright, now the distance formula is the next one you guys have to memorize. It's a little bit harder to memorize than the midpoint formula. It does involve radicals. This is why we practice radicals on day 1, because they come up pretty quickly. We're going to practice again, and then we're going to apply that in the distance formula questions here. So let's go ahead and write the perfect squares up here again so we can easily access them. 4, 9, 16, well technically 1, but we don't really need that. And then 25, 36, 47, 64, 1. Okay. Now, we're going to use the process that we learned on day 1. What is the biggest perfect square that is a factor of 125? 25? What's the other factor? Okay, so 25 times 5 is 125. Which one of those is the perfect square? What do I do with that? Okay, and what happens when I take the square root? Well, what is the square root of 25? And where does that go?
On the outside.
On the outside. Then what's on the inside? The leftover 5 from there. Okay? What about 34? Are there any perfect squares that are factors of 34? No? So then what would I do if I get that kind of answer? You leave it. If it can't be simplified, you just leave it as it appears. Okay? What about 32? 16 and, okay, which one of those is the perfect square? What do I do with the 16? And which is, where does that go? Outside. Okay, you have to remember the taking the square root part. Don't write 16 on the outside, write the square root of 16, which is 4. Then what about 81? What do you know about 81? It already is a perfect square. These ones where you have to find the perfect square, there's always another factor. This one is just 81 times 1. Alright, 81 is already a perfect square, so what would I write as a simplified answer? 9. Not square root of 9, right? It's just 9. Alright, so these are 3 different types of situations. The ones where you can simplify, the ones where you can't, and the ones where the final answer is a whole number. Okay? So keep that in mind. Now, the distance formula looks a little bit scary. Right? It's the same thing as with the midpoint. You need to have 2 endpoints. They're going to give you start, stop. Now, here, what I want you guys to do is write a little note for yourself. Length, right? Distance means length. The biggest confusion with the distance formula that I have found is that when you guys see a question that doesn't say the word distance in it, you have no idea to use the distance formula. So I'm telling you now, distance and length mean the same thing. So if I were to ask you to find the length of segment AB given two endpoints, which formula would you use? The distance formula. Even though you didn't see the word distance anywhere in the question, you still have to use the distance formula, okay? So if they're asking for how far are they from each other, how long is the segment, it's all referring to the distance formula. So keep that in mind. So this is the distance formula right here. I don't like how this is written, right? So if you want to switch it to this, all I did is just switch the order. Sorry. I don't know what I did. You can do that instead. Instead of having the 2's first, I like having the 1's first. It's really up to you. As long as the pattern remains the same between the x's and the y's, you're fine. So you can't go 1, 2, and then 2, 1. That's the only thing you can't do. But you can put them in whatever order you want. Right? So we're going to do the same thing that we did before. I'm going to take my points, I'm going to label them. x1, y1, x2, y2. Now the reason why I like doing the 1's first and the 2's second is because you read from left to right, so why not write them into the formula left to right? That's my logic behind that. Question?
Instead of square rooting the x2 minus x1, just take away the value.
No, because then you'd have to do the same thing over. You'd have to. That would give you d squared, not d. So you can't cancel out a square root that way if you have squares. All right. What I like to do is I like to set up. You guys can have your own system in how you do the distance formula, but the way that I remember it best is I write the setup like this. I have my giant square root, I have empty parentheses squared with a plus in the middle. And then I get set. Start plugging stuff in. Alright, so I'm going to do x1 minus x2. So what would I write in the first set of parentheses? 3 minus 4. Then I'm going to do y1 minus y2. What would I write in the next set of parentheses? -2 minus 0. Okay? I need to see this. At the very least, the least amount of work that you guys can show me is this at least. Alright? You can do mental math and whatever to get to your final answer, but I need to see at least this in terms of work. So I can check to make sure you have your signs and everything correct to begin with. Alright? So as we're working down, and you can show as much or less work as you want as long as I see the step. What is 3 minus 4? And what is -1 squared? Okay? What is -2 minus 0? What is -2 squared? 4. Okay? And then what's 1 plus 4? Okay. So I get 2 squared root of 5. Can I simplify that? No. Done. That's it. Everybody with me? Yes.
So if you do it, if you do x2 minus x1.
Mm-hmm. Your signs will be different, but you'll get to the same answer.
Oh, okay, because I got two different. I got 6.
If you were to switch the order, it would be 4 minus 3, which would be positive 1. 1 squared is still 1. If you switch the order here, it would be 0 minus -2, which would be 0 plus 2. 2 squared is still 4. So 1 plus 4 should still give you 5. So regardless of what order you do it in, you should still get the same answer. Did you accidentally write like a 1 or something here?
No.
Alright, give me a second and I'll come in and see what happened, okay? Alright, let's try the next one together and then I'll leave you guys to do the rest of them on your own. So we're going to label them x1, y1, x2, y2. And then using whichever form, using whatever form of the formula you want to use, we're going to start plugging stuff in. Alright, reading from left to right. If I take the x's and subtract them, how would I write that on the inside? Reading from left to right. 4 minus 6. You have the x's together being subtracted. And if I, again, go from left to right with the y's. -5 minus 2. Okay. Then we simplify. What is 4 minus 6? Okay. When you take -2 and square it, what do you get? Okay. So this little bit right here becomes 4. What is -5 minus 2? -7. What is -7 squared? 49. Okay. So now we simplified a little bit. What's 4 plus 49? Okay. Can 53 be simplified? So then that's your answer. So everybody see how to use the formula? One thing I do want to warn, before I let you guys finish the rest on your own, I want to warn you when there's a double negative. So for example, in here, if I have negative, if I'm doing the y section, if I have -3 minus -6, how would you really write that? It would be a plus 6, right? Double negatives can be hard to spot, but you do need to make sure you change it to a plus, right? Go ahead and do 3, 4, 5, 6 on your own. I'll walk around and help anybody use that.
Okay, so I think I got it. I think I went through, I think I distributed it.
Squish them together first.
I think I left mine on.
Yes, I do. If your answer can be simplified, you must simplify it or it is wrong. Daniel, your group, you guys hear what I just said? If your answer can't be simplified, it must be wrong. So that's the whole class we guys are talking to.
Yeah, so you got 5.
Yeah, that's what it is.
It's 5 to the square root. So you got 25. You do 25. Do the same thing you do. Oh,
Can you read that?
oh, so yeah, it's just
I did wrong.
28.
Because about.
It's 29. It's 18. This is so fun.
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Maybe it's sarcastic.
Maybe sarcastic.
No, you're serious.
So, he doesn't even know it's the same thing.
Wait, where's the B? 7 plus 7 and 7 to error variable. Go here.
Second plus the same as 1.
Yeah, how much you get 65?
65.
Stop. Second plus 7.
No. I'm saying variable.
Do not do that.
Wait, what? I started a program and we're going to.
So just make sure you guys can do examples 3 through 6 successfully, and then you guys can try out 7 and 8. They're a little bit more complicated. But once you figure out 3, 4, 5, 6, go ahead and take a look at 7, 8. We'll talk about them in a second.
Wait, that's from me. It was a good show. I'm not gonna lie. Yeah, we no, it wasn't. It's a TV show.
Alright. Can you settle down to pay your work?
Yeah, wait, is it though?
Wait, settle, do your work.
Wait, but what's the incident?
It's a TV show.
I think I did this.
Then you can try to do it right. Check it. And then
Same. I was over so.
wait, is it close to mine? Wait, yours is mine.
Are you doing it?
So,
It's hard to say.
I was watching movies, so I was watching and I did my other homework. And then I was like, you know what people do? You're trying to play where they are, unless you know it's almost no, but I usually
Alright, we're moving on to 7 and 8. Those of you who were not on task and did not finish it on time, it's your own fault for not doing that. We're going to talk about number 7 and 8. They're a little bit more complicated, if my technology will listen. All right. Number 7. Number 7 is asking if the measure of AB is congruent to the measure of AC. Okay. Now, what would we call AB and AC? What kind of objects are they? Segments. So when they're talking about the measure of a segment, how do we usually refer to the measure of a segment? Length. We usually call the measure of a segment the length. So they're saying, is the length of AB congruent to the length of AC? How would I know? How would I be able to compare? I need to use what formula to find the length? Distance. Now, you guys can, here's a little tip, pro tip. If your segment is horizontal or vertical, you can just count. Right? Like if it was, you can just count the boxes to see how long it is. But if they're diagonal, you cannot count spaces or lines or whatever. You have to use the distance formula. Okay? So what I want you guys to do for number 7, when they're asking you to compare lengths, you have to use the distance formula for AB, then you have to do the distance formula for AC, and then compare them. Okay? So that's your task now. Find what the points are. I haven't labeled them. So find the points, write them down, and then find the distance between AB and AC and compare them. 2 distance formulas. Let's see. Alright, guys. I want to find the length of AB. You can tell me what the formula would look like for that. Anybody want to volunteer? The formula for finding the length of AB. Dan?
Second x plus.
No, I mean like the numbers, plug them in.
Oh.
When you actually use the numbers and plug them in, what does it look like?
All right. So.
Anybody else who has their? GeoHN?
-7 minus 6.
Nope. Hurry.
-7 minus 1,
Okay.
and you square all of that.
Yep.
And then plus
Yep.
3 minus 6, and square all of that.
Yes.
Why -7 minus?
Okay. So you mix your x's and your y's. You mix your x's and your y's. Yes.
Can we still do the thing where you do x1 and
Yes.
y? Okay, got it.
Alright, so listen. Okay, 6 is the y value for A. Okay? You don't want to mix your x's and your y's. If you try to subtract 6 from -7, you're mixing your x's and your y's. Don't do that. Okay? What's your final answer then? Yeah, there's energy. Why is what, Amanda? So -7 came from B, right? So we went from B to A. You have to go back to B to find the next y value. You're asking why it's 3 minus 6 instead of 6 minus 3? We started with B, -7. So that's what I was saying about not mixing your number. You can't go from 1 to 2 and then 2 to 1. So if you start with B and go to A, for the x's, you have to do the same thing for the y's. So in the same direction. Right? So you guys should get 73. Square root of 73. Right? If you guys are trying to find the length of AC, you can tell me what the formula would look like for that. Formula, I'm sorry that it looks so weird with all the weird things. Anybody for the formula for AC? Yes, Alex.
Parentheses 1 minus 2.
Okay.
Square.
Yep.
Plus. Parentheses of 6 plus 2.
Good. Squared. Alright, everybody should get that. And then what does that give you for the final answer?
65.
Okay. So are these two segments the same length?
No.
No, they are not. Right? So it's the only way that you can find their lengths.
No.
Now, bringing up the point that we made a little bit earlier, everybody listen. Whatever points you choose to go first, you have to maintain the same order for the x's and the y's. You can't go B, A, and then A, B. You have to maintain the same order. All right, 8 is the question we're going to end with. What's different about number 8? Okay.
No, like, closing thing.
All right, so there's no connection here. What does this mean? Distance. So how far is going to involve distance, but what am I finding the distance between? The midpoints. Do I know what the midpoints are? No. So this is actually 3 questions in 1. Okay? We have to find the midpoint of AB. We have to find the midpoint of BC. And then using those 2 points, we're going to find the distance. Okay? So you're gonna find the midpoint here somewhere, and then figure out how far they are. Okay, so this is both of the ideas put together. Find midpoint of AB, midpoint of BC, and then use distance formula. Go. The land you're guessing on there. Find the midpoint of BC. No, AB and BC. Find the midpoint of this, then the midpoint of that, and then those answers.
Oh, so you have to find the Good. Could you make these please? You can see the tables there. Oh, here it is. It makes total sense. Like that. You can just click on that. Oh my god. I love it. I love Oh, I didn't get it. Alright, so anybody know what the midpoint of AB is?
-1.
Okay, so your first midpoint should be -1, 4. Does anybody know what the midpoint of BC is?
0.
Be 0, 0.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes.
Should be 0, 0. Once you guys find your two midpoints, those are now the points you're finding the distance between. Right? So you would use the distance formula between those. It's good that they're zeros, it makes it a little bit easier, right? Be 1 plus 16. Or 7.
And that can't be simplified, right?
That cannot be simplified. We're 17. Right? Once you get that, you guys are good.
Oh my god.
Yeah, oh my god.
It's okay. Yeah, I'm like,
So our homework is.
Right, hold on, before I forget, I want to make sure you guys are aware, this was our last lesson, so that means next class is our review, class after that is our test. So our test is on Friday. I put, if you guys look at the front of your packet, you'll notice that due on the review day is your day 4 homework, your 1.7 worksheet, and then it says review assignment odd questions, so I'm not going to be checking that for accuracy. Or completion, like the same way I would for homework. The reason why I want you guys to do that is because if we do the entire review in class, I may not have time to answer questions. And I don't take questions before test. You guys walk in, set up folders, go. Okay? So I want you guys to have time to ask questions about the review. So that's why I want you to get a jump start on it. If you guys get a jump start, then you can finish it sooner in class, and then I can have more time to ask questions or answer questions. Okay? So in addition to doing the homework, do some questions. I recommend the odd, but whatever. Do some questions on the review, so you'll be able to finish it quicker in class. Does that make sense? Notice that we do not have a quiz. That's fine. We do not have a quiz on this. Right? We're going to go right into the review when you guys come back. 1 second.